You don't need to hide your resume in a donut box and then send it off to a hiring manager. I've seen this meme passed around on LinkedIn and other social media networks, and I gotta say, it's just another little bit of pressure that tells people you're not doing enough because you didn't send, I don't know, Janice and HR a box of Krispy Kremes. The truth is, job hunting isn't about quirky little tricks. In fact, a successful job hunt has pretty much like four elements. Now, I'm going to break this down, each element, and I want you to know it's okay if you're not perfect in all of these four areas. This is just giving you a guide on things to be mindful of that actually move the needle in your job hunt as opposed to reading yet another thing when you're doom scrolling on LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever you get your information about job hunting that makes you feel like, oh crap, I need to, I don't know, hide, in the bushes next to some company and jump out with a box of donuts. Really, the successful job hunt has a foundation in these four ways. The first one is going to be your resume and other sort of relevant materials like that, like a portfolio if you're in a creative or technical career. So, a solid resume can make or break your application. This element of your job hunt, if it's not up to par, it's going to be an uphill fight to get yourself into an interview, even if the other elements of your job hunt are super stellar. So, if you can get your resume right, it really greases the wheels for the next step in a successful job hunt, which I will get to in just a moment because I want to talk about applicant tracking systems. Applicant tracking systems are like the boogeyman of job hunting. Now, there are like over like 200 applicant tracking systems out on the market right now, not including proprietary systems. And they all work around the same way in the sense that it's just a system for companies and recruiters to just process candidates. So it's not necessarily designed to just auto reject people in many ways. It's designed to kind of like make it easier for people to process these resumes. Now, with that being said, there's plenty of applicant tracking systems that do use keyword features to rank applications. A lot of them now have different AI um, capabilities to help recruiters analyze the candidates. And now that I'm done with that little bit of defense, that they're not the boogeyman, they're not out to get you, I will say that while there are great recruiters out there, there are plenty of them that are overworked or for whatever reason, they're just leaning really heavily on these applicant tracking systems. So if you've ever applied for a job and then you've been like, wow, it's been like an hour and I've gotten a rejection, there are some reasons for that that don't have to do with the resume. So that could be, let's say there was a form in the application that required a certain level of education or experience, you didn't have that. Or if it asks, do you have a work permit to work in the country that you're applying in, what your time zone is. There are some things with these applications that if you hit the wrong thing, then that is going to automatically reject you. But in general, these applicant tracking systems are not, they're not designed to like disqualify quality candidates, even though sometimes in practice they actually do. It's why when you have your resume, making sure that it's very relevant to the jobs that you're going out for and that the jobs you are applying to, you are a relevant fit for. And don't forget that a recruiter is going to see your resume at some point. Particularly like if you're applying to maybe smaller companies and startups that might not have a whole lot of applicants, they're going to see your resume at some point. Now, however long they're actually looking at this resume is going to be another story. Now, before I get on to the tangent of resumes, which I could talk about for a long time, I've been in career services for about 10 years now, so I have opinions. However, after you make sure that your resume is relevant and on point for the jobs that you're going for, the next element of a successful job hunt is going to be direct action. Now, this one is kind of self explanatory. You actually have to apply to the jobs. Direct action can take many forms, like working with a staffing agency, cold pitching a company, applying through a job board, etc., etc. And sure, it even could take the form of a gimmick donut, And in fact, when I did recruitment, I would have said no to a donut. I love donuts. Come on, I got a sweet tooth. The unfortunate thing is that even if I did love that donut and I said yes to it, and I wouldn't have said no, like it wouldn't have guaranteed that my bosses would say yes to a candidate. It's why I didn't last, as long in recruitment as some other people, even though I found the work very interesting and I was good at it, is that on the flip side, I wanted to give everybody a chance. It's why I'm a career coach now. And when it comes to direct action, sometimes people get this kind of confused. They will be like, oh, all I'm doing is spending time on this job hunt. And then you break down a bit of a time inventory and you find out, yes, they did spend all day thinking about the job hunt, but a lot of that time was spent maybe like doom scrolling on LinkedIn. It wasn't necessarily spent having a resume or a referral or something like that go to an actual company or staffing agency. Now, just this is common. Like, I mean, I've done it when I've job hunted before. It's really easy to feel like you're productive, but when you actually break it down, what did you do? Now, I once worked with a woman who complained about job hunting for she said that she'd been job hunting for a year. And I was very sympathetic. I wanted to help her quite a bit. And part of working with me as a coach is that I like to figure out what you have done so I'm not just having you do the same thing over and over, because I know for so many people that feels depressing. And when we kind of dug into her activity, I discovered that she had really only, in that year, she had really only applied to like 15 to 30 jobs in 3 months. The rest of that time in that year, she'd actually spent volunteering on a lot of tech projects because she was deeply worried that her skills were not good enough. When in fact, her skills were completely up to par. When I looked at the recommendations she's gotten on these volunteer projects, how she had been promoted to lead when she was part of this apprenticeship program, to lead the other apprentices, when I looked at her portfolio, like everything was up to snuff. But she was so nervous about applying that she wasn't good enough that she just really didn't. And because she had been worried about this job hunt and she had been doing things like improving her portfolio and volunteering, she hadn't really thought about the fact that she wasn't actually getting her resume into people's hands. And this is why I always want my clients, and I really encourage anybody who's watching, to boost up your mindset, your positive attitude, which I get it. Like, it's not like life is always a walk in a park. However, mindset is totally crucial. It's often overlooked. When you are stewing in insecurities or convinced that you can't succeed, it's really common to self sabotage. You can miss interviews, ignore opportunities, you can quit too soon in whatever endeavor that you're trying to do. It's really important to prime your mind so you can go the distance. Early in my career, I worked at a tech college that had kind of like a white glove service for our grads, where literally I would call up companies, I would set up interviews at the school, I would coach them all before the job interview. And in fact, for my students, like if I knew like that maybe they had uncertain transportation or car troubles, I would literally drive them to the second interview on location. I was very available. It was like, one of my like first jobs in career services. So I was very gung ho. And what our company, well, what the school offered was this sort of intensive career services. So it was part of my job. Like, and this was very well known. And I had a student who had essentially like pretty much the hiring manager at this one company that I was pretty much like handing him off to, getting him this job on the plate, had told me that they loved this guy. They really liked the first interview with him. His schoolwork was good. His skills were great. They appreciated that he was bilingual, and they were even willing to overlook the fact that he had a criminal record that, for a lot of jobs, would disqualify him from this sort of high level employment. But they didn't care. Like, they really liked him. They just had one bureaucratic thing where he had to go to the premises and just do like a tour, a walk around with the hiring manager. So they could just do like an orientation. And when he arrived there, like once they finished that, they would just start the hiring paperwork. Something where I had prepped him with an email, text message with the location. We had already had a verbal in-person meeting at the school. I sent him messages and emails to remind him the day before. That morning, I didn't hear back from him. I sent him another text message like an hour before. I'm getting worried. And then around the time that he's supposed to actually do this interview, which was essentially just like a rubber stamping of his position, where he would have made more in that job than he'd ever made in his life. He'd be making like, you know, very good money, great benefits. I get a call from the employer. He's not there. Where is he? I don't know. I can't get a hold of him. And the unfortunate thing is, not only was this not good for him, because they were like, okay, we have another candidate who's just as good and does not have a criminal record, and he already, like, we can just call him up. And the thing is that it made the school look bad because he did not show. And I felt really bad for him, and I tried to work on doing a second chance and stuff like that, tried to do a reconnection. But the unfortunate thing is that a first impression does count. And the school that I worked at, all of our students were what they called non-traditional students, where everybody was like, frankly, everybody was older than me. They were all in like their late 20s, their 30s. Most of them were veterans. So none of these were folks where you could go, well, you know, he's just a kid. Give him another chance. You know, and you have receding gums and hairlines. People assume that at that point you can show up for a thing. And while that we can debate whether or not that is fair or not, the unfortunate thing is that sometimes, like, if you are not like getting your head in the right place, you can mess stuff up for yourself. Even if you have an opportunity on just a silver platter, like, here you go. That is why this is overlooked. Oftentimes people think, oh, it's woo woo, or oh, I don't want to like do self-help or something like that. But the fact remains that if you think you're a piece of garbage and you're not worth anything and nothing good ever happens to you, that kind of affects how you do things. And job hunting is already isolating and it's not fun. You get rejections. It's really easy to feel bad. So you got to work on that stuff so you can get your head into the game and actually like go for the thing that you want. And the truth is that when we're thinking about job hunting, it's not a bunch of gimmicks. A lot of these things are they're maintenance in some ways, you know? You're doing this as a routine. It's like in a lot of ways kind of like physical fitness or cleaning your house. It's a maintenance thing. You don't do one wacky thing or one extreme thing or one grand gesture once and then everything falls into place and you don't have to do it again. You kind of have to like do this consistently, persistently. And that is where sometimes it becomes a bit of a slog. So I'm not saying that you have to hustle and grind, bro. I'm not saying that you have to like be on this 24/7, but having a sense of consistency, having a positive attitude, making sure that you're being strategic and mindful of what you're doing can really help. And what also really helps is the fourth element of a job hunt, which is your reputation. Now, if you think about reputation, and I'm using that word intentionally because if you say something like personal brand, people get wrapped up in the idea of like, do I need an Instagram? But a reputation is how your grandparents got jobs. You know, if you've ever gotten that sort of boomery advice to like go to Main Street and, you know, hand out your resume, shake the manager's hand. I don't know if I'm just showing my age by being told that was the advice I got. Partly, you know, when you are, that's how they did it. And it was helpful for them if they had a reputation that preceded them, where people knew that they were good folks who did a good job. And that, like, essential element of a job hunt has remained the same, like, I don't know, since people started getting jobs. You know, tactics can change for all of these elements that I've talked about. There's a lot of tactics that you can use to bolster up these elements, but the essential essence of it remains. And your reputation is how you're going to get referrals. It's how you build up your personal brand and also draw opportunities to your door. Some people develop their reputation by being maybe a thought leader online. I mean, I hate that term, but like essentially like influencer or whatever, while other people do it on the job among their coworkers by being reliable, competent. There's a lot of ways to do it. You know, it's essentially, are you known for your word? Are you known for getting stuff done? And depending on the size of the town or the city that you're in or your industry, your reputation could be really key. I once worked at a different school, and we had one student who was not the most pleasant fellow. And that was during my era where I just worked with a lot of veterans. So these are kind of rough and tumble dudes. And they thought that this guy was overly crude and boorish and like bigoted. Also a little lazy, a little surly. He was really known for doing these group projects and doing nothing on it. And in essence, this guy was a piece of work. The problem is that I lived in an area, and he lived in an area with an industry that was very small. So when all of his classmates were getting jobs, because they were, it was an in-demand kind of tech field that they were in, and they were getting jobs around town, and then he went around interviewing. The problem is that his reputation preceded him. People did not necessarily want to work with somebody who was like unpleasant and also not shouldering their part of the workload. You know, Now I've also seen the flip. It's not always negative. Sometimes you can have a reputation that can bring opportunities to you where you don't really need to job hunt. I got once a teaching opportunity at a university simply because people that I went to university with when I did my graduate program, people remembered me. I was very active. I was pleasant enough to be around, and then through my activities on LinkedIn and other places, I guess I kept fresh in people's minds. So when this opportunity came about for this teaching position, they they just were like, "Hey, do you want to do this?" I didn't really need to apply. It just came to me. So why I really like focus on this point is because you can really make your job hunts now and in the future so much more easier just by having some visibility in your industry, and you can increase awareness of your reputation through things like networking. And I could have a whole video on networking. Just think about networking as making pals, well wishers, friends. You don't need to think of it like you're, I don't know, going to a chamber of commerce event and you're eating canapes, with guys in suits. I mean, it could be that, but it doesn't need to be. I've had opportunities to do like speaking engagements simply because, like, I was on vacation in Lisbon, Portugal, and I was on a boat tour. I got talking to a lady, and she's just like the cut of a jib, I guess, and that led to me speaking at a co working space. I got one job when I met through somebody that I met in like a Zumba class, so networking can take many forms. And if you're more introverted, which I can be, like I don't get energy from social situations necessarily, you can also think about content creation, or you can just be present in your industry. You can be part of the conversation, you can be part of a professional association. You can take the time to occasionally like go out to lunch or have a coffee with your coworkers. Like you don't have to overthink this aspect. And in fact, for all of these elements, there are numerous tactics to bolster each area. So you don't have to do it all. In fact, you should choose tactics that genuinely align with your personality and goals. That's the real trick of it all, is doing things that actually make sense with what you want and who you are. That's the trick. That's the gimmick. I hope this was helpful for you. Just so you know, I'm Sammy. For the last decade, I've helped hundreds of creatives and techies up-level their careers. I counsel my clients on making resumes that resonate, LinkedIn profiles that people actually want to connect to, interviewing their best, and building careers that support lives they love. My clients have gone on to work for Apple, Spotify, Facebook, and more. I have individual consults and extended coaching packages. But above all, I want you to have a job and a career that you feel good about. And I also want you to save the donuts for yourself. Like, don't send it to people in HR unless you really, really want to.